All right. Hi, Sandy. Hi, Annabelle. Hi, Mikey. Thank you so much for joining me here today on Vonvo.com. Today's date is May 4th, 2013, and we're here to discuss the MayDay riots that took place this past week. Just before we get started, I just wanted to go over two quick ground rules here at Vonvo. The first is that right now this conversation is being recorded, and after the recording is completed, we'll be uploading this video to the internet to our YouTube channel. Is that okay with both of you?
Yep.
Yes.
Great. And then on top of that, here at Vonvo, we're all about our discussion staying both civil and valuable. We don't want there to be any personal attacks against one another. Are you guys fine with that ground rule as well?
Yep.
Yes.
Perfect. So then let's go ahead and jump into the discussion. For anyone who's going to just watch this discussion live right now, as well as watch this discussion going into the future, would you mind just giving a quick background of yourself and why you're so passionate about this topic? And maybe Sandy and Annabelle, you guys can go first, and then Mikey, you can go right after.
Hi, my name is Sandy Naranjo, and I'm an organizer for United Food and Commercial Workers, Local 135, representing grocery workers in both San Diego and Imperial counties. I'm a union woman. I've been raised union my whole life, so my passion is with workers.
Great.
My name is Annabelle Salcedo. I am also an organizer at UFCW Local 135 in San Diego, and my passion is to change people's lives with bettering their workplace by forming unions and just basically letting immigrants and workers know the rights that they have, especially with this whole immigration stuff that's going on. And MayDay was the perfect time for us to highlight all that stuff.
Great. And Mikey?
I'm actually not an organiser with the UFCW, but I do support them. They're a fantastic union doing great work across the country. My name's Mike. I'm the co-founder of the Fair Pay campaign. We're launching this summer. We haven't actually launched yet, and we're going to be the first national organisation in America devoted to fighting unpaid internships.
Great. Great. So, thank you both for that. So, I guess I'd really just sort of like to get this started off with, the idea of exactly what is, MayDay all about, Sandy. I mean, because a lot of people, I think, might have heard of it, might not have heard of it, in the news this past week. But can you kind of just give us a quick overview of exactly what was really kind of going on?
Yes. So, as far as MayDay, what we all know is that MayDay was a day in history that happened in Chicago of workers fighting for the rights in the workplace, for humane working conditions. And that resulted in workers taking in the streets. It resulted into riots. But at the end of the day, the workers won, right? But today, the workers are still struggling for humane working conditions. And today, we see this with immigrant workers who employers are don't fight because we will deport you. So what we have in our society is a discussion about immigration reform. It's up because we have so many workers that are undocumented, and they're being punished because they're undocumented, but they're being forced to work because they create an available source to the employers, which is their labor. And so on MayDay, and to take back the history and the spirit of MayDay, is workers' rights. No matter if you're documented or not, you have the right to be treated humanely. And so on MayDay in San Diego, we highlighted workers' rights, immigrant rights, all rights for all people.
Right. Annabelle or Mikey, do you want to add on anything on top of that?
Annabelle? Or
In San Diego, we are close to the border. We are, we're right at the border of Mexico. So here we do have fired from their jobs for wanting to organize unions in their work. For example, we had the Hilton Mission Valley workers that did get, known as the San Diego Nine, that did get fired from their workplace for forming unions. Also, we are currently organizing workers at a supermarket here in Southern California called Northgate Gonzalez, and they started a small family-owned corporation, and basically we marched in front of their store on May Day to highlight the fact that those workers are being left behind from the American dream from their employers. And so they are immigrant workers, and so we went in front of the store and let the management know that San Diego still has those workers that want to form a union. And also we've heard that employers now are telling people, you shouldn't form a union because it's gonna, cause audits and stuff. So now they're scaring people in that way. So it was very important in San Diego for us to highlight that in our city. So that's what we did here in San Diego.
Right. So, Mikey, I mean, do you, for the most part, agree with each of the things Sandy and Annabelle are bringing up, or is there anything else that they're forgetting?
I mean, I think Sandy and Annabelle are doing incredible work, organising workers who have been let down by our economic system, by our politicians, by our corporations, again and again. And that's what MayDay is about. It's about the people like Sandy and Annabelle, and I hope possibly like me as well, who are doing that kind of work nationwide, fighting to represent people who most need representation. MayDay is International Workers' Day. It's the day when we recognise the people who really built this country, the people whose labour props up every single business, props up every single endeavour, build every single idea. But time and time again, ordinary people, working people, aren't getting a fair shake. And MayDay is the day when our voice, organised labour, stands up and says, we are here and we demand our rights.
Great. So, can you guys sort of talk about, you talk about these workers' rights, and, ultimately, is there some sort of similarity between, the whole Occupy Wall Street movement and, what MayDay is all about, or are they two totally separate, items or subjects? Sandy, would you mind going through that for us?
Yes. They're not two separate events. Occupy Wall Street and MayDay are one and the same. Because it's the very fact, it's about, disparity between, wealth disparity, right? So we have a huge wealth discrepancy between those that are very, very rich and those that are working class. Hence the 99% and the 1%. And it's getting worse. And MayDay, it was exactly that. I mean, the workers weren't saying the 99%, the 1%, but that was their message back then, and that is their message today. So it's one and the same.
Right. So, Mike, you want to add anything about that?
No, I think they're absolutely right. MayDay was one day, and this is the day when people are talking about economic inequality. But I thought it was really telling that this year, Richard Trumka, who's the president of the AFL-CIO, the largest union federation in America, issued a statement in support of MayDay. And that's something that leaders of the AFL-CIO had not done for a long time before Richard Trumka started doing it. And I think that's a testament to the fact that Occupy Wall Street put inequality back on the agenda. It put poverty back on the agenda. It put workers' rights back on the agenda. Because the labour movement had been systematically weakened by Republicans and also by Democrats who went along with it. And Occupy Wall Street was an enormously loud, enormously influential and very, very successful way of saying there's still a huge number of people in this country who care about inequality, who care about justice, and who care about workers' rights.
Right. Sandy, you seem like you were agreeing completely with that. I mean, is it, in terms of the whole governmental end of this, I mean, is that something that you think has really been sort of overlooked for a while now, and in terms of this labor movement?
Yes, I was nodding my head because the fact is it's true. Occupy Wall Street, came about because of this economic movement, because the labor movement has been about economic disparity, because labor movement has, been closing the gap between this disparity. And so it has been shunned for 30 years. In this country, for 30 years, no one wants to talk about the labor movement. Everyone wants to scapegoat the workers and, put sympathy to these employers that, they have these huge, taxes to pay. They go across the globe and operate business. And so what happened with Occupy Wall Street is that they put pressure on government, saying, we're tired of this big bank bailouts. We're tired of the economy. We don't have access to health care. We don't have access, to higher education. And for the labor movement, it was a blessing because it was coalition building. Because the labor movement didn't focus on, attacking the big banks. It was just mainly getting contracts for their members. And so finally now you have this whole movement together, not only fighting for the labor movement, but fighting for these issues that are very, very important.
Yeah, Annabelle, you, in terms of the whole, government sort of overlooking this, this idea of, labor movements. I mean, what do you want to add on top of that?
Well, like people nowadays think labor movements are bad. Like we're MayDay, these freeloaders. All they want to do is this. I think that people don't know exactly what the people are out there to do. Labor unions and union and non-union workers, we all fight for the same thing. They need respect. To close that gap between the big between the 1% and 99%. So I think that labor and community working together is very, very important, and I'm so glad that the Occupy movement began because it kind of opened everybody's eyes to do that. Even the government, you know what I mean? Even though they do like immigration reform, for example, it's gonna. And I'm touching about immigration reform because it does affect working families and working people. And we want one that is going to be for the people, not for politicians. So that's where the government part. Us as people need to be able to let politicians know that we want something to work for the people, not for them, for us. Us, the people, are the ones that live through that every single day.
Right. Mikey, what's your take on just, overall either government ignorance or, or government acknowledgement of, the labor movement? Because, I mean, you brought up that individual who on MayDay, raised his support, and I know exactly who you're talking about. I forgot. You can repeat his name, but I know exactly who you're referring to, and I want to say that he gets a good amount of publicity when it comes to unions and rights of workers. So I mean, is the issue that people such as that individual are not getting enough publicity, or those large labor unions are not representing people properly? What exactly is it?
I think it's a number of issues. I think, for one thing, the labour movement, as Sandy just mentioned, has understandably focused on winning rights for its members, representing people, contractual level rights and benefits in the workplace, and that's understandable. But they've done that to the detriment of a broader movement that fights poverty and inequality. That's one problem. I think the second, so that's one issue. The second issue, to do with, I think, more broadly, because we were talking about government before, is that people are incredibly dissatisfied with government. Congress currently has the same approval rating as cockroaches. Like, conventional government is not popular with people, and people are looking to other methods to raise their voice. And one of those is Occupy Wall Street.
Right. So, the next thing that I was going to bring up is, in terms of, in terms of this whole immigration concept. I mean, Sandy, I'm just trying to make the direct connection. So, if you wouldn't mind repeating it, I mean, between both MayDay, union and workers' rights, and immigration reform. I mean, can can you just make the connection there so people kind of understand exactly what you're referring to, and what, let's say, in San Diego people are concerned about, and how those two events tie together?
Yes. So I'll explain the broad concept, and I'll let Annabelle talk more about the San Diego base. But broadly, why workers and immigration rights are connected is because the very fact that we have 11 million undocumented immigrants that live in this country, because they are displaced from the home country. So they are economically displaced, and they have no other come to the United States because they want to make a living for themselves and for their families. And they've been here for years. It's not like they crossed one day and all of a sudden, in a month we have 11 million people, or like just different people crossing. It's not that simple. And these workers, they come and they're working in industries that people ignore. I mean, there are hotel maids, there are janitors, they are mowing the lawns that are invaluable. So what happens is that the fact that we don't have immigration reform that is just, these immigrants live in fear. They can be deported. But Annabelle mentioned the Hilton Mission Valley here in San Diego. 9 workers, leaders at the workplace, wanted a union because they were being paid, below. I mean, they were pretty much being paid below minimum wage. They were forced to work off the clock, and forget about healthcare. I mean, these people have families, and so when they tried to organize into a union, the company, in order to union bust, the company went through their status to see if they were legal or not. And the company tried to say, oh, no, it's not because you're organizing. That's okay if you're organizing. It's just that we want to check if you're legal because that's a liability for us. The fact is, they use that as a union-busting tactic. So immigration reform is in the heart of the labor movement right now. I mean, it's always been a discussion with the labor movement because it's the fact you're talking about so many working women and men that provide services that we're always going to need. We're always going to need janitors. We'll always need people to take care of our kids. We're always going to need people to mow the lawns, right? And the very once you start asking for a living wage, we're going to deport you. And not only that, once you're deported, now you have this record, right? And if you try to apply for citizenship, you can't because you have a felony on your record. You violated a crime in this country. So
right.
That's where it's tied. I mean, immigrants are workers, and they're people, and the very fact they're deemed illegal. I hate that word, illegal. And the only reason why, because they want to have these immigrants labeled as second-class citizens.
Right. Annabelle, you want to add anything on top of that?
Just the fact that, like I said, we are talking to workers at the supermarket called North Gate Gonzalez, and the thing is that workers come from their countries for a better life to the United States for the American dream, right? And what happens with these workers that they work for immigrants that came also and were able to have that American dream, but then they leave their own kind, their own culture, their own, behind, like for example, this Market Gonzalez market that I'm telling you about. They're a family that came from some little ranch in Mexico, Guadalajara. They went to Anaheim. They opened their one store, and then the father's goal was to have one store for each child, which is 13 children. Now they're 37 stores strong, and they're leaving their workers behind. They do give money to the community. They do give back to the community, but what do they do for their workers? The moment they start talking about union, they scare them. They tell them, oh, if you talk about union, it is going to trigger I-9 audit. So why are they scaring workers like this? Why are they not letting workers be able to also achieve the American dream like they did and not scare them with immigration reform. So that's why I'm going to repeat again, MayDay was very important for us in San Diego. I wanted to highlight the fact that immigrant workers are workers in general, worker rights or immigrant rights. And we cannot forget that. And not only on MayDay, but all the time.
Right.
They're not.
Go ahead,
They're
Mike.
not just worker rights; they're human rights.
Exactly.
Well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I feel particularly strongly about this because, as you can probably tell from my accent, I'm an immigrant. I was born in England, and I moved to America to be with my wife, who's American. But people don't ask me if I'm an immigrant, and no one asks me for my papers, and no one asks me if they can check my documentation, because I sound the way I do and I look the way I do. And the fight over immigration is often just an ugly excuse to go after people of colour. No one ever asks me my immigration status. I don't know why we blame undocumented immigrants, and let's use that word because there are no illegal human beings. A human being can't be illegal. I don't know what that means. They lack documentation, fine. But there can be nothing more human than wanting to make a better life for yourself and to undergo enormous challenges, often like quite dangerous conditions, with kind of oppression that you've been talking about, just to try and create a better life for themselves and their family. And I'm not American. You know, I can't trace my ancestry back thousands of years in this continent. But people who have, you know, people whose families came over on the Mayflower, there was no border patrol at the Mayflower. It keeps getting harder and harder. People who came to this country 300 years ago just had to pitch up and that was okay. And people who benefited from that, the fact that you could just arrive here and build a new life, are now trying to pull up the trapdoor behind them and prevent the next generation of potential Americans from living their potential. And it's awful. It's workers' rights, like you said, and it's human rights.
Right. So, Mikey, you also were talking about how you're doing some work in the whole unpaid internships arena. Would you mind talking about that and how it relates to this as well?
Yes, sure. So that is what I do for a living now. I run an organisation called the Fair Pay Campaign, and we're launching this summer. We've just scaled our first pilot campaign in New York. There are a lot of workers that get marginalised and ignored in America. Some of them are migrant workers, like we've just been discussing, but another group of workers that's almost universally ignored, that almost universally has their rights denied, are unpaid interns. For so many industries that young people want to get ahead into, public policy, media, the arts, finance, law. If you want to get ahead, you've got to start as an unpaid intern. So, first of all, these unpaid internships are illegal. Just because you call someone an unpaid intern doesn't mean you don't have to pay them the minimum wage. So, there are anywhere between 1 million and 1.5 million interns in this country should be receiving a fair wage and aren't. But there's an even more pressing issue, which is that if for all of these industries that people want to break into, you've got to start as an unpaid intern, that means that people who can't afford to work for free have no hope of getting ahead. If you've got to be able to work for free for 6 months or a year to become a journalist, how can a student who doesn't come from a wealthy family afford to become a journalist? If you've got to work for free for a long time in order to get into politics, how can you afford to get into politics? And so we have systems that are systematically excluding people from jobs that they want and stopping young, brilliant people fulfilling their potential and living their dreams.
Right. So it really all revolves around, this concept of people, just not having these different hurdles to having a fair sort of working life. Is that really a lot of what it comes down to?
Yeah, we're called the Fair Pay Campaign. That's what we're about. We're about fairness. We believe that everyone's labour has dignity.
Right.
Every single individual works deserves a salary. just because you call someone an intern, doesn't matter what you call them, their work still has value and they're still entitled to a wage.
Right. So, Sandy and Annabelle, could we move into some specific things that should take place, like action items, things that you want to see occur, and then we can sort of talk about like some solutions, sort of thing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For the actions that obviously that I want to see is, definitely more protection for workers to organize into a union. Obviously, what we have going on nationwide, we have a campaign called Our Walmart, which is Organization United for Respect at Walmart, and Walmart workers across the country desire to have a better life by being respected at the workplace, having better wages, and we need to have legislation that protects these workers who want these to have these demands, and that they shouldn't be fired, because that's what's going on at Walmart and that's what's going on at other workplaces. So for myself, I mentioned Walmart because I'm working on the Walmart campaign, but for everyone, for all workers, I want to see action that protects workers who want to have a better life and who want better working conditions.
Right. And just in terms of like those specific, so it's in terms of worker conditions. I mean, are there any like specific things that we're trying to get like passed either in DC or in the state of California, like specific legislation that you guys are trying to get passed, or things you're trying to get repealed?
So that's a perfect question. Back, a couple years ago, we wanted to have the Employee Free Choice Act, which would make it easier for workers to organize into the union. See, Annabelle and I, we represent workers in the private sector, and it's harder to organize workers in the private sector because there's a whole union busting industry that makes millions of dollars a year to consult corporations like Walmart, like Target, on how to bust union drives. So the Employee Free Choice Act would have allowed workers just to sign cards. If they wanted a union, they can become union. So without going through this whole dreading process where they sign cards, and then the National Labor Relations Board, decides on an election date, and then that gives time for the employers to come in and to do captive audience meetings where they gather all the workers to tell them how unions are bad and how they have management. And then they also do one-on-ones where, they talk to each individual employee, say, hey, I'm your friend. Or they'll just fire the workers who are the strong leaders who won't take, management's answer as a final solution. So the Employee Free Choice Act, which, was something that we pushed for, I wish that could be revived back on the national scheme of things. But as far as for statewide, just more, pretty much just more regulation for corporations like Walmart who get tax subsidies for hiring workers. So there's no accountability for Walmart to pay those workers a living wage, even those taxpayers like Annabelle and myself are, paying Walmart to hire people, for them to hire people at minimum wage and no guarantee that person's going to have their job.
Right.
So we're subsidizing poor jobs.
Right. Mikey, what sort of, do you agree with those sorts of repeals and things that should be implemented?
Absolutely.
Can you talk about that?
Make it clear. I just want to make it clear at this point. I'm speaking in a personal capacity as me, rather than the Fair Pay campaign. So, in a personal capacity, I strongly support the Employee Free Choice Act. Like, if you can join the Republican Party by signing your name to a card, I don't know why you can't join a Labour union by signing your name to a card. On a professional level, the Fair Pay campaign, we're fighting for full enforcement of national minimum wage legislation. Millions of people, millions of talented young people are being denied their rights because they're being classed as interns. But just because you class someone as an intern doesn't mean you don't have to pay them the minimum wage. But too many interns don't know that they're legally entitled to a minimum wage. So we're fighting to have the Department of Labour, specifically the Wage and Hour Division of Department of Labour, enforce minimum wage laws.
Right. And do you guys anticipate, these sorts of things being incredibly difficult hurdles to, get over, or do you think that these are like practical solutions that could be implemented tomorrow? Is there just a lot of bureaucracy, blocking any of this from just taking place tomorrow? Is that really the main issue? Sandy, you want to talk, or Annabelle, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, definitely there's a lot of bureaucracy, but most importantly, there's too much money into politics. The Supreme Court ruled that corporations are people. So now you have the Koch brothers dominating the political system in this country. You're having corporations dominate. So the very fact that the 1% can control what type of legislation can go in, and when I mean the legislation, because they're actually not legislators, but they can put in their puppets because they can fund all these candidates to go into office and to pretty much kill any bill that is pro-worker, that is pro-immigrant, and put any bill that benefits employers, that benefits the wealthy, pretty much leaving the workers behind.
Right. So, I know, Mikey, you're kind of talking in the text chat. Larry brings up a question. In terms of interns not getting paid, when let's say like there's a startup that doesn't have any capital. I mean, how do you expect? How do companies handle that situation?
So first of all, companies should pay their interns as an investment. Every study, every bit of data ever shows that organisations that pay their interns get more out of them. If you feel that your labour is being rewarded with a wage, you're going to commit to it more, you're going to bring your best talents and your dedication to it more, because you know that your labour is being valued. But I think my broader point is, if startups can't afford to pay their staff, then they don't have staff. Like, my apartment is filthy. I would really like a cleaner, but I can't afford to hire a cleaner, so I'm not going to have a cleaner.
Right.
I don't know where we get the idea that organisations get to exploit talented young people just because they call them interns and not workers.
No, of course. I hear exactly what you're saying. So, I think the next thing that I would, sort of ask about is, so what happens next? I mean, like, there was these riots. Are these riots going to continue happening? Is this like sort of now, it was just a May 1st sort of thing, but now, I mean, in terms of rioting, in respect to MayDay, I mean, is it just go back to now, being more part of, the whole Occupy movement and having these sorts of things, as well as the other different things Occupy represents, be sort of, have people's voices be heard on these subjects, or, is more rioting needed? What exactly really is supposed to take next? Should take place next? Sandy or Annabelle, do you want to talk about that?
I think that May Day shouldn't be the day that we take it to the streets. We should take it to the streets all the time. It's funny, as we were planning the May Day rally, we met with the San Diego PD because obviously they want to know our route. They want to know if we're going to cause trouble, right? And I asked him, does the other side do stuff like that? And he laughed and he's like, no, because nobody's going to come out and listen to what they have to say. They do more like fundraisers and press conferences. So that to me was like, hey, you know what? Then the people really have the power. If we take it to the streets, not only on May Day, but we take it to the streets to know what we're fighting and so that because mainstream media doesn't go our way. Mainstream media doesn't report our stuff the way it should be. MayDay was about people and community, and the way mainstream media here in San Diego was just labor unions and people that marched, and we had over 1,000 people march in our MayDay. We marched 4 miles, and so I think mainstream media needs to get the story straight and let us people to get out there and our voices heard and make sure that the right message is being heard, not only on MayDay, every day, not just MayDay.
Right.
So yeah, I call for riots.
Mikey, what do you think really needs to take place next, or what do you anticipate is going to take place next?
I think people are waking up. People realise that a smaller and smaller swath of the population has a greater and greater proportion of its wealth. That people are working hard and they're never able to get ahead. That there are millions of people who owe more on their homes than their homes are worth, and no one seems to care. That they can fight and strive and still be held back. And people are waking up to that reality. And so what starts as Occupy becomes a MayDay movement, I think is going to build into real grassroots campaigns for equality and justice. I don't know exactly what they'll look like. I don't know if there'll be riots. But there's going to be a movement of some kind of people who say we've had enough. We've had enough. Walmart workers who've had enough working endlessly at $7.25 an hour with no benefits when the owners of Walmart are worth $20 billion. People have had enough.
Right. So so basically on that point, I mean, that's basically a direct, correlation right there between like the Occupy movement, right? I mean, these top tier CEOs, having these sorts of enormous amounts of wealth. That's a direct comparison on the whole labor issue of where the whole Occupy movement sort of sprouted up from, right, Sandy?
Yes.
Yep. Okay.
Yes, I mean, the Occupy movement, it came about. Think about it. It came about the fall of 2011, and what happened earlier in 2011, Wisconsin, where Scott Walker, the governor of Wisconsin, attacked public sector workers. What's holding the union density in this country is public sector. So the standard of living is pretty much set by public sector because private sector has been attacked for so long. And public sector workers are attacked, and then you see such high unemployment, not because this is doing poorly, so people are making this connection. High unemployment, unionized workers being attacked, because the very fact that these big banks are getting bailouts on our backs, we're creating these, the profits to these corporations. We're making the profit, and we're not getting any share of it. So Wall Street came up, and Wall Street highlighted the attacks on working people, the attacks on labor, the attacks on the poor, the attacks on students, the fact that they can't afford education.
Right.
Is there a baby in the background?
Oh yeah, my son's playing video games.
Annabelle's a proud working mom.
That's right. All right, great.
How old's your son, Annabelle?
He's 6. He's playing, I think.
I was going to say, it's 10, he's up late, but then you're on the West Coast, so it's a bit earlier for
No, it's 7:22 here.
you. Oh, okay. So it's not too bad for him. Yeah, I'm burning the midnight oil at this point.
Great. So, just quickly, what I also maybe wanted to have you both clarify was that UFCW 135. What exactly is that?
United Food and Commercial Workers.
Okay, and is that
135 is the local in San Diego.
Represent.
right? And so, what basically, what exactly, the direct correlation between what MayDay is about and what you guys are doing over there? Would you mind describing that?
Well, the reason why we've participated in MayDay in the past years, but this year it was really big for us because lots of our brothers and sisters, not from UFCW, but from like the janitors, from SEIU, USWW, which is the labor union that represents the janitors. Also from Unite here in San Diego, which represents the hotel workers. They were being attacked. Actually, Sandy was part of a 5-day hunger strike in support of those immigrant workers at the hotel that were getting fired for their immigration status and because they wanted to form a union. So we took this opportunity to highlight our campaign on the immigrant workers that we're talking to at the Norte Gonzalez supermarket. And we decided, since we've been working with community groups, grassroots, and we decided to work together because it's been marvelous the way that community and unions are working together here in San Diego. We're fighting currently a Walmart in a community in Sherman Heights. They came into a small neighborhood Walmart, wanted to come into an underserved community, but they basically bought their way into San Diego with the Republican mayor that we used to have. Now we have a Democratic mayor, first time in 30-some years in San Diego. And so we took this opportunity to be able to highlight that. Community and labor working together, we make humongous strides. And so that's why labor decided to endorse and take a big part in planning. I'm really bummed that we couldn't have a grassroots organizer here to discuss this, but maybe in a different platform we can have a grassroots organizer here, a community organizer working with us, so they can also tell us their part.
Yeah, no, of course. No, not a problem. So, I guess the next question I would ask is, what's both your guys' impressions of forecasting, let's say, the next couple of years down the road? I mean, what are you anticipating the country's going to look like? If you had to put your sort of foreshadowing hat on. Sandy, you want to go first in terms of are these riots just going to continue for decades out, or do you think that there's going to be some real action take place?
The struggle is going to continue, and we're so blessed with social media because now I can talk to people across the globe so easily, and the very fact that it's not over, the very fact that I can see what's going on in other countries and how other workers are fighting in those countries, how those workers can see what we're doing in San Diego. So it's going to go on. People are going to keep fighting. And we know our history. We know that, we're going to see pushback. Wall Street, the police, they came down hard to, pretty much to kill the whole Occupy movement. Not just, in Wall Street, in New York, but in San Diego, Los Angeles, the cops really came down and to evict all the occupiers. So the fact is that we are, what I see is that we're going to still keep fighting. We're going to be communicating with other people across the globe and spreading the message, and it's going to get stronger because of the very fact that we can communicate through Facebook. And we don't, there may be other forms that's coming up in the future. So,
like Vonvo.
Well, there's Vonvo.
Like Vonvo, right?
Yeah, exactly, like Vonvo.
That's right. Great, and
yeah. Hopefully Vonvo will be instrumental to a revolution happening in the United States.
That's right. You got it.
That's right.
That's what we're trying to do. So no, we really want, more and more people utilizing the platform, such as people like Mikey and your guys' self who represent these causes. To have a forum where you're actually discussing and collaborating on these different ideas. I don't know how much, let's say, intern work you both might be working on, but Mikey's obviously fully entrenched in that. So the idea that all these different things can be connected.
Entrenched is right.
Right. Exactly. So, Mikey, what's your sense of what's going to take place going forward? Do you think you see light at the end of the tunnel, or not so much?
So look, I'm not Nate Silver, so maybe I'm not the right guy for predictions. But income inequality is worse in America any time since the 1920s. The rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, and it's unsustainable. Because not only are people going to be outraged, but you can't have an economy that functions that way. An economy where hard work doesn't pay anymore, where people are turning up at emergency rooms because employers aren't giving them health care. The economy can't function that way. It's completely unsustainable. And so, in the next few years, I think a consensus is going to begin to emerge. The Republican Party is going to going to have to leave their lunatic asylum, come back to the real world, and engage with ideas. So I think there's going to be broad political consensus in the next few years, and it's going to take a while, but I think it will arrive about some.
Do you guys hear Mikey? Did his audio go out?
Yeah.
Yeah.
His audio went out.
Mikey, are you there? I don't know. Your audio went out. If you want to just click exit Vonvo and re-enter, you can. I'm not sure why that happened. So, no, not a problem. Yeah, I mean, so what I was just going to say is, and we can kind of wrap up, but the idea that hey, Mikey, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, go ahead. You can finish what you were saying.
I guess I'll actually finish with a slightly different talk, which is that in my native London, in I think 1965, a group of about 24 gay men and lesbians gathered in Trafalgar Square for what would become the first gay pride parade. And being gay wasn't legal in England until 1967. So these 24 people in 1965 were attacked by thugs who were around them. And then the police arrested them. Not the thugs, but the people who had been at this parade. I think if you'd told someone at that parade that 45 years later we'd have a president of the United States who supports marriage equality, full marriage equality in the United Kingdom, employment non-discrimination laws, gay members of Congress, gay members of the Senate, gay members of Parliament in England, if you'd told them all those things, those protesters in 1965, they'd have said, that's ridiculous, that will never happen. But because of the dedicated efforts of campaigners who are willing to fight and fight hard, LGBT people are moving towards complete acceptance in our society. And I think that the work that all of us are doing is going to be the same. It seems like we have insurmountable tasks, but I think in 50 years' time we're going to look back and say our communities are fairer, our communities are safer, hard work pays again, our labour unions are stronger, and we'll be amazed at how far we've come.
Right. Sandy or Annabelle, do you want to add anything on top of that?
I think I totally agree with Mike. Like, LGBT was kind of like what, and I think that it's going to be the same thing with our struggles, with our middle class, working class struggles. It's going to be the same thing, and it's just we need to keep on fighting it. Like Sandy said, the struggle is never ending, and that's what we're put on this earth for to do. Us, we're all pretty young, I can tell, and I think it's our mission to do that. and educate and inform other people and to join our movements and fight for what's ours, reclaim what's ours, and not, like you said, Republican Party needs to come back from their lunatic little world and realize that the world is changing and we're going to be out there fighting and speaking for it. Sorry, that's my chihuahua. Sounds like a big ball.
That's okay.
Pretty much, just to add as well, is that, the LGBT history have these parades. They started as riots. And there's so much struggle for the LGBTQ community. And there's so much struggle with the labor movement. I mean, in the United States, the government didn't recognize unions. And it took legislation, during the Great Depression, to give unions the recognition needed to grow stronger. And what we see in the past decade is that there's been attacks on unions, and so it takes working people to come together to demand. I'm sorry, the chihuahuas underneath.
It's okay.
But the fact that it takes people to get back on the streets, and just like all the movements we see, LGBTQ, movements against police brutality, labor movement, it just takes people to go out and to keep fighting. And to be honest with you, with the Republican Party, I mean, they pretty much are latch on to the Tea Party, and they're too scared to abandon them. And the Tea Party is not a grassroots movement. It's wholly funded by the Koch brothers, started by the Koch brothers. So definitely highlighting, bringing up grassroots movement again, and debunking movements like the Tea Party movement, and focusing on the people and the people's struggle.
Perfect. All right, so guys, I was going to say, thank you so much for joining us on Vonvo and sharing, these opinions. And we're happy to have you guys back on again for any of these talks, or Sandy, as we were talking, Occupy Wall Street. So, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate, your opinions and value them heavily.
Thank you for putting this interview together. I appreciate it. And it was nice meeting you, Mikey.
Nice to meet you too, guys.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks
so
so
much, guys. Bye-bye.